now I'd like to introduce our panel here. We've got Jacques Urlus from the Netherlands representing NBA, which is the Dutch Institute of Chartered Accounts, and is also chair of XBRL Netherlands. We've got Willem Geijtenbeek, digital reporting leader at PwC Netherlands, and also vice chair of the corporate reporting policy group at Accountancy Europe. Jose Moreno from 2H Software in Mexico, and founder and also member of the XBRL Standards Board, and Elina Koskentalo, from XBRL Finland, also independent XBRL consultant. So thank you very much for taking part in this panel. And there's a reason why the Netherlands is slightly overrepresented on this panel, and that's because there are jurisdictions where we are already using digital signatures in XBRL. So Jacques, if I could start with you and pass you a microphone so you can answer. And yes, ask you to explain a bit more about who it is who's using digital signatures in the Netherlands with XBRL and what exactly is being done there.
Okay. To be honest, we were a little bit lucky. We started with a mandate in 2017, the mandate for average medium-sized companies. And the Dutch law states that an average-sized company must be accompanied with an auditor's report. So that's nothing strange, I guess. But another part of the Dutch law states that an auditor's report always must be signed. And we were there digital, of course, because the filings were in XBRL. So we had to make a shift from let's say paper-based signing to digital-based signing. And the auditors, the accountants in the Netherlands were the first one, they had to deal with that. But luckily, because that was the same period that ADIDAS was published in this new form, and the ETSI standards were renewed the year before. So we had a very good starting point, and everything was clear again. We had to use the ETSI standards because we had to adhere to ADIDAS. So we started with that. So that is our framework. It's just the ETSI standards, and we're using SARS for the digital signatures. So and we were the first one, of course, to try it. We had to event everything ourselves. For example, the signature policy, something new. It's a text somewhere on the internet in an XML format. Saying what is the legal meaning of the signature. It was not there, but we were the first one to create that thing. And everything worked from the start. Because we had the mandate in 2017 and there were a lot of worries. But at the end, everything worked. The whole chain from the, let's say, the company until the Chamber of Commerce worked. And for some of you already know that we have a system, a methodology in the Netherlands called standard business reporting. So we want to create one standard. And because the method we used for the accountants was very successful, the same method has been copied by the actuaries and the the appraisers. That's what I was looking for. The appraisers, yes, that was the term I was looking for. So now we have the same solution working for the actuaries and the appraisers, besides the accountants, all based on standards. We all support like SARS, ETSI, so nothing fancy.
Great, thank you. And a lot of the work that we're doing in the Digital Signatures Working Group is trying to learn from this experience and then coming up with a framework that allows us to apply digital signatures to XBRL in a consistent manner, and also figuring out how we apply digital signatures to inline XBRL reports as well as XBRL reports. But Willem, I'll come to you. As it stands, many securities regulators, central banks, and other authorities that collect reports rely on simple username and password for authentication when receiving those reports and checking that the person filing the report is who they say they are. Can you say a bit about why now might be time for that to change and why we should move on to something a bit more sophisticated?
Yeah, sure, Paul. Exactly as you're saying, what you just said, many regulators still rely on portals, either portals using company login credentials or personal login credentials, but it's just that. It's just access to a portal and not linked to the individual filing. But going forward, well, what you see is since digitalization is really taking off, and especially ESEF and even more so CSRD are triggers to reconsider whether the accountability that we want at company level should also be pushed forward to the individual directors of the companies, because actually they are the legal persons that take ownership of the report, and that's in many company laws that is stated. But right now there's no mechanism for conveying that. Whilst they do that, or they did do that on paper, the directors have to sign off on the accounts or on the regulatory reports. There's no equivalent in the digital arena. So there's a call for more, at least the opportunity, the possibility to sign off digitally, and making the link to SBR. Back in 2016 or even 15, we did have a discussion whether the company directors also would have to sign off on the SBR annual statements, not only the auditor. But we then decided, even though technically it would be possible, we decided against that because of the costs for digital certificates, which at that point in time were really high, and they were considered from a political point of view not acceptable. But technically, we already had the discussion, and it would have been possible to also have the director sign the accounts back then. So this is basically where we're coming from.
And that's very interesting. You mentioned the issue of the cost of the certificates. What's changed there? Is that to make them more affordable? Is that
well, that's a relative term, but what you see is now, since digitalization has progressed much further than it was in 2015, 16. Let's say the relative importance of the cost of a digital certificate is not perceived as being that much of a burden as it was back then, because now companies have to use digital certificates for much more purposes. I mean, for example, tax declarations and statistical declarations, they also need to be signed off. So if you see the network effects from more usage, then the relative costs go down. So at this point in time, if I can speak for the Netherlands, the cost of an individual certificate are not being seen as a significant hurdle for adoption anymore.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And I think one other topic that's come up in the context of digital signatures that John Turner and I have discussed is the impact of AI, and in particular of responsible AI, and the importance of traceability that brings with it. That when you're looking at a figure in an analyst model, the ability to trace where that figure came from becomes increasingly important, and digital signatures potentially have a very important role to play there in being able to demonstrate that this particular figure is not an AI hallucination. It really was from a real financial report, and it was audited by this entity and created by that entity, and signatures give you the ability to verify that. But if I can move on, to Jose, and you've worked very closely with the Mexican Stock Exchange and other Mexican regulators. Are these kind of issues of trust in reporting also relevant in a Mexican and perhaps more broadly Latin America context? And can you see a day in which corporate and auditor accountability through digital signatures adds to market trust?
Of course. Actually, right now, the Mexican Stock Exchange, they offer an API for third-party vendors of software that offer editors to create the XBRL filings, to submit the documents, and the documents have to be digitally signed. But they wanted to move forward with also signing digitally, maybe parts of the report for the auditor or the whole document for specific officers inside a company. But in our case, we faced an issue where all the Mexican citizens, they have a certificate issued by the tax authority. Everybody has to have one of those. But the foreigners, they don't have that certificate. So, and obviously for an IPO or for a debt listing, there's frequently a foreigner involved. So that's why they didn't keep pursuing this idea. But I think it's something really important because even though as we keep evolving the taxonomies and adding more digitalized information inside these filings, in the end, we keep attaching a PDF with manually signatures in a sheet of paper, you know? And to me, that's ridiculous because even though the government keeps spending on improving and trying to make more modern systems, it's incredible that we are still attaching, in the end, a copy of a sheet of paper with manual signatures. I think that by having this innovation from XBRL International and seeing that more countries are adopting digital signatures in a standardized way will help push forward the local regulation in Mexico and also in Latin America to say this is the way that everybody's doing it. This is the way forward. And I think it's going to be very beneficial to have this kind of a standardization around the digital signature.
Thank you. And I think you and Willem both highlighted common problem with digital signatures, which is not necessarily the challenge of actually signing the document, although there are challenges there, particularly when you get into the topic of trying to sign part of a document or signing for purposes. But actually, the big challenge often is the certificate infrastructure and actually getting the certificates rather to people so they can make the signatures and managing that side of things. But I think it is always interesting to compare the digital signature world to the paper world that it's replacing, because when you look at what we do on paper and what we rely on for a signature, there's actually very little you can do to verify an ink signature. Even once it's being copied around, it's very hard to actually verify that. So digital signatures are giving us a lot more in terms of verifiability than what we had before. So Elina, in a number of EU jurisdictions, the audit profession is very much tied to their PDF based infrastructure. They have little tokens, dongles that they can use to digitally sign PDFs using that infrastructure. And I think it's probably going to be very difficult to move them away from that. But do you think that sort of digital signature that we're talking about for inline XBRL would be welcomed on ESEF reports in Finland, for example?
Yes, absolutely. And at the moment in Finland, we are still in a situation where the ESEF filings are not recognized as official financial statements. The law is actually written that you need to publish your financial statement but not prepare in ESEF, and thus then everything is paper that you sign off as an auditor. But now in the next weeks, we're actually passing a set of new laws that will recognize the ESEF and other XBRL filings as the official ones, and no more mentioning of any paper anywhere. The same also for auditor statements. The CSRD assurance report has to be in inline XBRL, so we cannot escape this question anymore. But we need solutions. We are very much looking forward to having a standard.
Yeah.
Yes. No, we cannot do that. So we look towards XII and we look towards the EU or a global solution, and hope that will solve the issue for us fast. For the certificates, we do have a national system in place with the ID cards that they have a chip that acts as the certificate, but it's difficult to use. You need to have a chip reader. So I hope there will also be a better way to distribute the certificates. Thanks.
Thank you. And yes, and that's emphasized one of the things that we are acknowledging in the working group is that yes, we need a standard. We need consistency between the different jurisdictions, but actually in a lot of jurisdictions, there's already some infrastructure in place. There's already, perhaps certificate infrastructure. in place, or in the case of the Netherlands, there's already signing in place, and we need to be able to accommodate the existing infrastructure, but try and make it more consistent. Now, you mentioned solutions, and specifications and standardization is obviously one part of the problem in terms of solution, but then the next part of it is software. So, Jacques, if I could ask you, at the moment, there's obviously no software out there that allows you to sign an inline XBRL report either in the whole, okay, sorry, but either in whole or in part. In fact, here's some details in a moment. But do you have a view on what that type of software should look like and what the user experience should be?
Oh, that's a very good question. Yeah, we have a solution, of course, at this moment. But it's not ready for inline XBRL. But one of the solutions we have is an open source solution. You can find it at opensbr.org, and it explains a lot, I guess, if you take a look at it. But I see that solution, because that solution is being reused in a lot of other software solutions. But I see that solution as a Lego building structure. And I think what we have to do in the Netherlands, if we want to support inline XBRL, we have to disassemble that structure and use the same bricks again, and to rebuild something. And I think that can be done very, 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 very quick. And it's up to the user what he wants to see. So I'm more the technical guy, you know me. I'm more the technical guy, not the end user. Just I don't mind. But I'm certain that the things we now offer to the end users, which is very simple, we can also do that with the same building blocks, the same Lego bricks to the for the new situation. So I'm not afraid of that. And I really would like to have one European standard solution, and probably there will be some, let's say alterations because of local laws and things like that. But a generic solution would be very nice. Also, yeah. To be honest, the creation of the signature, that's not the difficult. Creating the hash, which is the basis of the of the signature. There lies the complexity. And if we can keep that simple as possible throughout Europe, throughout the world, then we have an easy, adoptable system. And that's the experience I have. Because we support everything from PDFs to other XML files, XBRL files, the link bases, if there is a issues extension, all of it. But and every time we only have to adjust the bricks.
Willem, did you want to add to that? I can see.
As Jacques made clear that, let's say in the Netherlands, I think the experience that we had and the developments that we have done basically created the building blocks for a potential European solution. But we don't, our suggestion is not that EU or at the EU level we adopt the Dutch approach, although we would love that and it would work, we think. But the point is we've got all the components in place, and based with those components, I think we can build we come up with a European approach, which does not necessitate real development work. It's just agreeing something that could work across EU area. I think that's the most important aspect, but we've proven in the Netherlands, I think that's the core point, that it can work. We've got everything in place. One thing I want to add to that discussion before we move on to what Elina and José said, the level of assurance that we provide in the Netherlands by using a digital signature is significantly higher than a paper-based, an ink signature, because when the auditor signs, his or her certificate is actually being checked for validity. Not only whether it is still a valid certificate, but also the qualification of the person, so that you're actually also allowed to sign. So there's a register behind that, which is being actively managed. So you know when you got a digitally signed Dutch SBR set of financial statements, including auditor opinion, you know that the auditor was actually the auditor that signed it. We know a three-way verification, but also that auditor was at that point in time, authorized to sign. And the same infrastructure, I think, is very important when you want directors of a company to sign. And I think in many countries you have a register, like in the Netherlands, we have a register linked to the company's register. But I'm not aware that in all other countries in the European Union, such a register exists. So that's an important requisite, I think, for this solution to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's an important thing, that adopting digital signatures for digital reports is not just about moving the status quo from signing paper reports into the digital world. It's actually enabling more, allowing us to do more with the signatures in terms of their verifiability and their scope and their purpose and their meaning. So I think it's perhaps easy to look at it as a problem. How do we replicate what we've got? But we don't want to replicate what we've got. We want to be able to do everything that we can do today and do more digital signatures. And you mentioned about expanding what's been done in the Netherlands to a European-wide solution. Obviously, we're then looking to have a truly international solution that will work around the world. Absolutely. I think from what we see inside the working group, the difference there is what digital signature frameworks exist already in the legal context, what the legislative framework is for digital signatures, and obviously the EU with particular standards on that side that we need to adhere to. But that's why we say that the XII solution, the international solution for digital signatures, needs to be technology agnostic on the signature side, is because different jurisdictions already have existing different standards there. Jose, on the topic of software, obviously there's a bit of a chicken and egg situation always with these things. Until there's some software, regulators find it hard to mandate the use of signature or need any standard. And similarly, until there's a mandate from regulators, software developers have little incentive to develop solutions. So do you have anything you can add on in terms of how we can move that forwards, and indeed what software should look like for maintaining digital signatures?
Of course. I think that another important issue when you're dealing with certificates and digital signatures is that, especially if we look at the recent past, 10 years ago, when you were about to sign something digitally, with a certificate, you usually needed to install something in your computer, maybe a plugin. But if it comes from Java, the Java virtual machine, it's the trap, Almost any institution would allow the client to download a JNLP plugin. If it is a Windows application, then you're leaving out many other operating systems, And when you think about corporations, they really have a tight IT policy, and it's really complicated to tell a bank, all your officers that need to sign documents, they need to install the software, That immediately would trigger a huge certification process, That's why I think this solution also has to innovate in how we can digitally sign documents without having to install plugins, through the use of new technologies like certificate vaults on the cloud, or having cloud signing, and not relying on the client, but rather on the very self-certificate authority. Maybe I think that's going to be key to speed up the implementation process, so nobody has to install anything, and that it feels like a breeze to sign a document.
Yeah, and I think ease of use has been a significant issue with digital signatures and actually cryptography in general over the years. The technology for signing emails has existed for pretty much as long as I can remember using emails, and things like GPG. It's been around for years, but it's still not routinely used. It's still not routine to sign your email digitally because the user experience has always been so terrible. And so that's obviously something we must overcome in bringing digital signatures to XBRL. Elina, is there anything you'd like to add on the topic of software and
you mentioned the chicken and the egg problem. I actually don't think that it exists. I think once you have the standard and we know how we want to apply the building blocks, as you said, and we have them in place, I think the rest will follow quite quickly. At least in Finland, we're just waiting for there to be something that we can use. The mandate is essentially there, if we can apply something. So that's that should be first. And then, yes, I agree with what Jose said, and also it would be very helpful to have some open source tools. We've already done some trials with the open SBR tools that the Netherlands have created, and they work for us too. So something like that would be great, and of course commercial tools as well that can then provide better functionalities. But with those, I think we could get far. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we do just have a couple of minutes for questions. Has anyone got any questions to the panel? Gilles.
Yes, thank you, Paul. In fact, I would like to know if you are aware of the initiatives in the different part of the world, and especially in Europe. And if the first question, and second, if there are the European Commission, for instance, which is having a project on that, because it could be interesting to speak about that to the authorities, because this is, in my opinion, something which we could try to convince the authorities to be involved in that, don't you think?
For the group, I'm only aware of what Clive is doing with the valuable lie. It seems the same. It seems to have a solution for the same problem, but the other part you were telling, I was not aware of that this was playing in the European Union. So if you have some details for me, yeah. I'm sorry.
It could be interesting to for all of us to try to get some information for first who could be dealing with that in the European Commission, because I'm sure that someone is dealing with that, and second, how to involve them in our work or vice versa. Don't you think?
Okay, thank you for the signal. I will.
I'm sorry.
Hello, I'm aware of some of these trends in the European Union. And it's also, I think, where you see diverging trends in perhaps the world, that where many parts the signing is quite technical with it's a hash and a digital signature, and it's something that the computer can decrypt. And you see the European trend, especially now also moving towards EIDAS 2.0, where there are intents like with the signature policy, the expression of will, the idea of also adding in attributes that I'm signing from a certain role, which could be an accountant or managing director, or just adding all kinds of aspects in which add legal value to something which has always been a very technical something, like we see a lock in the screen when we visit a secure website and we know if a secure connection. So I think that one is quite interesting, and I think it's also quite interesting to follow all the discussions currently regarding EIDAS 2.0. Because the European Union wants to push those technologies to the end user with cloud signing, with you can set signatures, but they also state there must be free tools available for everybody with a very good user interface that they can verify any kind of document, what kind of signatures are in there and whether it's useful. So I think that trend would be also want to follow, to look for the usability and the acceptance.
We are in the Netherlands, yes.
Yes,
of course. Okay. Funny, because one of the initiatives of OpenSBR just walked inside this room.
Can I? You're saying, I think that alludes to for this community to, I think, an important question that we need to answer ourselves. Okay. Where do we want to start with setting our standards? Because we're not reinventing the wheel. We should take what's already there at European level, this generic, this 2.0, for example. That's something, it's a given for us, and we want to add on that. But the question here for this group, I think, is how do we apply those generic developments in the specific environment of signing structured digital reports, in reporting change? How do we do that? And how do we think that could be standardized at EU level, which I think is a main driver internationally, but if possible globally. But I think EU drivers are stronger than the international driver, but that's my personal opinion.
please join me in thanking